All right. Well, welcome to the show. We're sitting here with Juan Lugo from Don Doroteo Cigars. We met Juan at PCA 2022, and we're just kind of walking by his booth. Had a really interesting booth, and jumped in, started asking questions. And the more we talked to him, the more this really amazing story unfolded. So we wanted to have him back to share a story in more detail and to dive into the brand and some of the ambitions of the company. So Juan, welcome to the show, and we're excited to talk to you.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me. Really excited to be here with you guys.
Yeah, no, it's my pleasure. It's one of the things I love most about the cigar industry is the family values and the family legacy. The multiple generations that, just carry on the family tradition. And, family's important to me and legacy is important to me. It's something that I think about all the time. And it's one of the things that struck me that you've got kind of an interesting, very unique legacy story when it comes to the cigar industry. So, so let's kind of start with the beginning. Tell me about where you were born and kind of like what your parents did and just kind of generally like what your upbringing was like.
Right on. Yeah, so I was born in New York City in '89. So, grew up during the '90s. During that time, it was in Washington Heights, uptown Manhattan. So for folks that aren't well versed with the city, it's essentially like Harlem. When you hear Harlem, it's that whole strip. So that's kind of like the environment we grew up in. It was cool because, in hindsight, obviously, the significance of that, like, growing up in New York City and the melting pot and everything you're exposed to for good or for bad. But then also having an alternate reality where every summer, during summer vacations and stuff from school, my parents would take us to Dominican Republic and we would spend months and months and months there. So between, I say like mid-June up until school started. So like late August, sometimes even spilling into September, we would just stay in Dominican Republic. And so it wasn't like, what you see in the videos of the resorts and the clear water beaches and whatnot. We were in farms essentially. So we were in the valley, Center Valley, and it was all countryside. I would spend a lot of time with all my grandparents, Doroteo being one of them. It was just, as a kid, there were parts that I really loved about it, but there were a lot of boring parts too. So, going through the fields at the time and getting bit up by mosquitoes and everything, and just the whole nine, and having a vivid memory of Doroteo swinging a machete, clearing paths for myself and for my brother, who was younger than me. At the time, I was just like, this sucks. Like, I want to go play basketball or something. But now in hindsight, I'm like, man, that was pretty sick. Like, I got to have that firsthand experience and got to see the fields that he worked in, because he used to produce more than just tobacco. He raised animals and was had a green thumb, so to speak. He was into agriculture abroad. So got to learn a lot about all different kinds of crops and stuff. But not to get too away from the question there. So grew up in New York City. My folks migrated to the U.S. in '82 and '84. They met here. As many immigrants do when they come to the U.S., they kind of just get whatever job they can get. My dad got into the jewelry business, became a jeweler. After almost a decade or so of doing that, he was starting losing his eyesight because I guess the tools he was using to create some of the jewelry. So he pivoted and just took whatever gigs he could find, landed somewhere doing, it was low income work. He was a housekeeper, so it was honest work. He worked his tail off, so to speak. After a few years of that, he started his own housekeeping business in Lower Manhattan. So there's a strip where there's like, oh, man, what do you call it? I think it's like Lower East Side, where it's known as like one of the bougie areas or whatever. So there's like these a row of like plastic surgeon offices and just a bunch of medical offices where a lot of the celebs and folks that are, on the higher echelon of society, so to speak, where they go. And so my dad just like randomly sent me a picture with 50 Cent. Like, I'm like, what the
Oh
hell?
my gosh.
So stuff
Yeah.
like that, which was really cool, growing up in New York City, that was like one of my idols and everything. So, and I remember as a young kid, I would go with him to the hospitals, and I would beg him, let me go work with him. But he obviously can't let like an 8-year-old go
Right.
to, child labor laws and all. But on some weekends, he would do some extra gigs for the hospitals that he would work for, and he would bring me along. And in hindsight, it was child abuse. He would bribe me with $20, and I was like, yes, let me get that 20
Right.
bucks. And I would work the whole day with him. But I just was always that sort of kid, always trying to like find like a hustle, so to speak. I always wanted to get money, earn money, so that I can, for kids stuff, buy candy and buy some Jordans, stuff like that.
Hmm.
And so, yeah. And so my mom kind of same deal, just, honest work for immigrants in New York City. My grandfather, Doroteo, he would come visit us about once a year for, come get his medical checks and whatnot. And then he would skedaddle back to Dominican Republic. During that time, he would stay with us in a little cramped apartment in New York City. My mom would just tell me like the day of, like, hey, your grandfather's coming, so you gotta give him your room. I'm like, where am I gonna sleep?
Right. Right.
So a lot of times I would either just, bunk with him, like in the same room, or I would go, I don't know, go try to figure something out. But during that time, it was kind of annoying, but in hindsight, again, and it's pretty cool having those one-off experiences with him, because I didn't really get to see him other than the times I spent in Dominican Republic in the farm, or when he would come visit us in the U.S. I got older, around, let's say, my adolescence, around like 8, 9, 10, I remember he would take us to the park, uh, play basketball, whatever, and he would always just watch from afar, and he would smoke either out of a pipe. He would smoke andullo, so his own tobacco that he would harvest in Dominican Republic, or he would smoke some box presses that he would roll himself. And that was his jam. So that's his one vice, and that's what he always did. And I remember, like, after every time he came to visit, he always had those box presses. And eventually I got to the point I was like curious, and I was like, hey grandpa, you let me can I try that? And I'm like 9, 10 years old, and he's like, what the hell's wrong with you? Like, no, you can't try this.
Yeah.
It's for adults only. And I'm like, okay, cool. And then I just kept asking every day. So every day I kept asking, and eventually one day he finally let me try it, and he made me swear I wouldn't tell my mom. First thing I did when I got home, obviously, was brag about it. But
So how old were you? Because this is you actually beat me to it. Because during the podcast, we always ask everybody the same 3 questions, and I skipped over them because like we already know each other. But it's do you remember your first cigar? When was it? What was the story? Do you
mhm.
remember your first drink of alcohol? What was that story? And do you remember your first time shooting a firearm? So
Okay, yeah,
since you beat us to the punch, like dive into those 3 just to derail you a little bit,
yeah. I love that. That goes with the whole ATF theme.
right?
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's cool. So this was my first time smoking a cigar. I didn't do it properly. It wasn't cool. I wasn't
How
suave
old
about it.
were
I
you?
was I was like 9 years old.
Okay.
So
Did you
I didn't.
inhale?
I did, and it really like, just kind of threw me off, and I never wanted to do tobacco again. But
Right.
so the way it happened was I kept begging him every day, and finally he got sick of me of asking it, and he said, "All right, here you go."
Right.
And so he didn't even instruct me on what to do. So the first thing I did was exhale, and I blew it essentially on the cigar, and it just he's like, "What the heck are you doing? You ruined my cigar." He said, "You have to inhale," and so this is a horrible story to tell. This is like
They
this is
always
before
are, though.
before the whole woke era. So yeah, so he told me inhale, and so I did, and I just choked, and I was like, that was horrible. And he's like, you see, it's not for kids. And I was like, why do people smoke that?
Right.
So yeah, I left it alone. I never really wanted to do smoke cigars or anything like that until maybe a couple years later. I was maybe 11 or 12, and he came to visit like he always did, and he bought some box presses, and I remember he had them wrapped in like a yellow silk bow that he always used to carry his cigars in. And because he stayed in my room, where he had them was in my closet. So when he left, he must have forgot them. At least I think that's what happened. So I go back to my room. I'm like, finally, dude, I got the room to myself. Go to the closet, and I'm like, I see it was a stack, like maybe 6 or 7 of them in a yellow bow. And I was like, oh, shit, what do I do? I tell mom. I was like, no. So,
No.
so I hit him, and then I kind of just left him there for a little bit. And then a couple days later, I was like free or whatever. My mom was like working, I think, and I just cranked open the window. New York City, like where I'm
In the
gonna go.
house?
Yeah, I was a kid. I didn't know what
See, I thought you
Yeah.
were going to piggyback on the whole entrepreneurial side that you're always trying to make money, and I figured you were going to go sell them to
sell
each of your buddies for $5 a piece, and you all lit up in the alley or something.
No, not this time. So I did. I wanted to try these out myself. So I just cranked open the window and I just leaned out, and so I just lit one up. Didn't know what I was doing, obviously, and I just inhaled and exhaled. Just kept doing it. I was like, eventually I'll like it. And so
It worked.
I did a big mistake though, because I smoked it about maybe a third, and I left it on the windowsill on the outside. And fast forward a couple days, the weekend, our ritual was like every Saturday morning, my mom would put on some salsa, like blaring through the house, and that was like my cue, like it's time to clean. So we started doing our cleaning our rooms and stuff and whatnot. My mom goes in my room and she's about to Windex the windows, just clean them up, and she sees that and she's like, "What the heck?" And then I try to play it off smooth and say like, "Grandpa must have left it there. That's not a good move." Something like that, and she must have told him or asked him like, "Hey, did you leave a cigar on the windows?" Like, "No, I would never do that. I always go to the park with the kids." And so she came back to me, and obviously, at that point, I was, I was toast, busted. I was busted, but I gave her the rest of the cigars, and that was that. So that was my first time and second time smoking cigars. Alcohol, man. This is sounding like a CPS poster child.
Are you gonna say like when I was 5?
All the best childhoods are, man.
Yeah. We're Dominican, man, so we're known for like partying and stuff. So that's kind of like what our upbringing was like. So in Dominican Republic, the laws are very lenient compared to the U.S. Like I remember going to clubs and stuff like at 16, 17, and I'm like just try to act like a grown man, give them my ID, and they're like, "All right, you're good." Yeah. And then I was like, it worked. But really what it is they know you have dollars. They're like, they're going to spend money. Like, let them in.
They don't care.
So I was like, yeah. So it's crazy. So I think first like real drink where I got buzzed was probably like 13, 14. That was, we're having like a family in the U.S.
Dominican or
it was in the U.S. Yeah. So we were having like a family gathering, and my family, big family. So Doroteo had 11 kids. So I have 11 aunts and uncles, and all of them have a gang of kids. And then when we get together for cookouts of family reunions, we throw down.
Yeah, it's 100 people.
Yeah, it's a lot of people. Yeah, and so it's kind of hard to keep track of where the kids are. You kind of just want them to be safe and go play, like do your own thing, go play sports, whatever. And I remember we kind of got a hold of some of the beers and stuff, and a few of us just went off and hit somewhere, and we just got wasted. And then we come back, and we're like, all right, let's go eat. The food's ready. And then we come back, we're thinking like, oh, we're sober, no one's gonna notice. And we were like sloppy drunk. And my mom just kind of grabbed me. I was like walking, like thinking I'm all cool. My mom just grabbed me out of nowhere. She's like, "Are you drinking?" And I was like,
"Oh no."
So your mom seems to be the ATF warden in your family.
She is. My mom was she was SWAT. Like I remember my mom later in high school when I was getting in real trouble, she would like bust in my room. She would like kick my door down.
It's a raid.
And I'd be like rolling a blunt. I'm like, oh,
oh no,
it was bad. But
so what about firearms?
Firearms, it wasn't until later. So I became a gun nut after I joined the military, which is kind of goes hand in hand. But I really didn't. I was always around firearms in Dominican Republic. My uncles were in the federal government. They were in the military. They served in the Air Force over there. So I was always familiar with or comfortable around firearms. I always knew, obviously, not to play around with that. Never got, never went off and did anything stupid there. I would say
so you didn't follow the cigar and alcohol route of
no, not with firearms. Luckily, honestly, because I got in a lot of trouble doing other things, so it's good I didn't get my hands on that. So with firearms, I think it wasn't until boot camp, to be honest.
okay.
Yeah, I want to say it was like boot camp. I was like 19. I shot when a hell of a way to get started. I shot M4, 249, M240 Bravo, and the 9mm Beretta. So
Okay.
pretty
So
decent
that's
for
that's a good jumping off point. I mean,
yeah.
it's hard to top that experience.
Mhm.
I love those stories, right? Because no matter what the age is of people, for some reason they always remember their first experiences with these things,
Mhm.
and they're usually not just memorable, but they're colorful stories, right? There's always
Yeah.
some funny story behind it, and I think it's interesting, right? Because these three things, it's why we pick the name of the magazine, and it's why we have so much fun with it and everything else. But these things are I would say foundational elements to what America is, right? Like, I mean, when you go
Mhm.
outside this country and you say describe America, and they get into a lot of flattering things, but there's always some version of, oh, they're a bunch of cowboys.
Mhm.
They
Mhm.
drink and they smoke and everybody has a gun, and things like this. And I think that that original pilgrimage of bold immigrants that came over here to found America, some
Mhm.
of that spirit clearly still lives on. And I think that every kid growing up, it's always this rite of passage, right? You're not a grown up until you can experience these things, right? So we're always in
Yeah.
this rush to become adults.
Right.
What I think is so cool and interesting about your background, right, is that, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but this is my impression, right, when I heard your story, is, you come from these long roots in tobacco and Dominican Republic and everything, but you were raised in New York City. And neither of your parents, pursued the trade either. I mean, they were just
Mhm.
chasing their American dream,
Right.
as so many people have and continue to do. And so you were raised in New York City, and almost like summer camp once in a while. Like, I remember having being forced to go visit my relatives, and
Right.
believe me, it was nowhere near as exotic as Dominican Republic. But as a kid, it's just kind of like, oh man, I miss my buddies, and oh man, I wish I
Yeah.
was out riding my bike with my buddies. And here you are, on this farm in the middle of paradise, with the opportunity to learn about
Yeah.
this legacy within your family. And most kids, all they're thinking about is, man, I'm bored. Like, I wish I was at home with my bike and my buddies, right?
Right.
And
Mhm.
so you were, other than your family vacations and stuff, where you were exposed to it, you were really raised as a New York City kid.
Yep. 100%.
And we'll pick up when you jumped into this cigar industry, but I don't want to bypass things. So you you went through school. You you were probably, I'll give you the credit. You turned out fine, so you must have been a good kid at least half the time. We won't talk
Mhm.
about your mom's raids on your bedroom doing God knows what. Um, but you eventually graduated high school, and what made you join the U.S. military?
So I actually dropped out of high school. But and that's a long story, but I was pretty much playing hooky for my whole senior year. And then come time of like prom, which I know my dad knew, I was like, I was going to be excited about anything in school, it was going to be that, and
Right.
homecoming and whatnot. And I never mentioned it. And excuse me, I'm like sweating so much, just came from the gym. I never mentioned prom or anything. So he got curious. He's like, what's going on here? So he just went to school one day and spoke to the counselor and asked him like, hey, how's my kid doing? And she told him like, he hasn't been in school since December, so I don't know what's going on. And it was like it was maybe February, March timeframe, a couple of months before the school year was up. So long story short, I was pretty mischievous, and obviously at the time I didn't know what it was, but I was one of those kids where I was never like, I was always bored. Like I always needed more stimulation, and I just wasn't getting it. So I went and seeked it on my own. But eventually I went back to school and I graduated, thankfully, and they let me back in. My cousin Aaron, who's actually running, he's director of operations in Dominican Republic, everything with the factory, as far as quality control, leading all the folks at the farm. He lived a couple blocks from me. Right after high school, I was working like at a, car dealership. Didn't really have any aspirations of going to college or anything. And he tells me like, "Hey man, I'm thinking about going to the Air Force and becoming a cop." And I was like, "What? What do you want to do that?" And then he goes, "Can you, we had like this bond, like brothers." And he told me like, "Would you mind going with me to the recruiter's office so I don't get stiff or anything, and walk out of there with a contract?" And so I go with him, and I remember they showed us these videos of this guy on like ATF with a 203 attached to an M4, and he had like a K9, the whole thing. And I was like, I want to do that. And so we both walked out with Air Force shirts and contracts, and we were gonna go in doing the buddy system, which is pretty funny too, because we both went in initially thinking that we're gonna be like bad boys, like Will Smith, and we're gonna be like cops and stuff. And my cousin was into street racing at the time, and he got caught. He got pulled over, and he got a summons, had to go to court and everything. And it was like 2 months before boot camp. So the court orders were, he wasn't gonna get any trouble as far as like paying any legal fees or penalties or anything, but he could no longer qualify to be a military police officer. So I had to go in as an MP, and he went in as a chef.
Oh my God.
Yeah, man. But it's pretty funny though, because, I gave him so much crap for that. I was like, dude, like I'm out here pulling 12, 14-hour shifts and, the grueling sun, just walking around with M4, in the flight line, and you're over there flipping steaks, getting paid the same amount as me. But he actually went and deployed to Iraq. He went to Balad Air Force Base, Air Base rather. And I actually went there too. So it was pretty cool to, along the way we crossed paths. So even though we kind of split and went our own ways in the Air Force, we would just run into each other in random points in our career, which was pretty awesome. Yeah.
Okay. So you did your time in the military, you served America. We appreciate that. And then when you got out and you're back home, what do you do then?
So just to touch on the tobacco piece, because there were instances that were pretty instrumental, like left imprints, and I didn't obviously even know this until in hindsight, looking back. When we went to, when I deployed to Iraq the first time, I went to Al-Assad, just an hour, 45 minutes to an hour away from Baghdad. And it was a dry base, so we couldn't drink. So on July 4th, they gave us, I remember like yesterday, they gave us 2 non-alcoholic beers. And I'm sitting there in 105-degree weather, and I'm just looking at my sergeant like, dude, really? Come on.
On 4th of July, yeah.
Yeah, on 4th of July. So we would go and we would go drink or smoke in some bunkers. So some buddies of mine, we were off, and we went to some bunker that we claimed. Essentially, we had some little pop-up chairs and stuff, and we just sit there, and the only thing we could get our hands on was cigars. And the embargo they don't really care about that in Iraq. So we had Cuban cigars. So when I really first started enjoying cigars, because it was my only outlet aside from working out, it was during deployment. And and
I was gonna say, like, our magazine's greatest following is bred in the military. Anybody who's deployed develops their love of alcohol, tobacco, and firearms being deployed in the military.
100%, man. So there were a lot of cool experiences like that throughout, that 4-year period. After the military, I was very eager to get out. I wanted, because I had a vision, I had a goal. After my 4 years, I wanted to go back to Iraq as a contractor. So, and I had a couple buddies that were already doing that. So I hit up all the popular names, Blackwater, and they were like, "No, buddy."
So you're in the Air Force.
Yeah, you're Air Force. Like you had a couple cute deployments. That's cool, man. So I was like, all right, whatever. So I hit up some other companies. I actually got in contact with Floor, and I was working with them, and they were working me through the process. I got through a couple stages. Got through the whole interview and all that jazz. and I was set to go. And at the time, I had met my wife, and her and I. So I was stationed in Beale Air Force Base. That was my home base, which is an hour north of where I live now, Sacramento. So you already know where this is going. Uh, I met my wife at a salsa club, and we were dating at the time, living together and everything. And then I just told her one day, like, "Hey, I'm going to Afghanistan." So she's like, "What?"
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm going to I got a contract to go to Camp Leatherneck in Afghanistan. I was super stoked. A couple of my other buddies were going too. And at the time I was maybe 21, 22. And, you know, they told me it was going to be like 90 grand tax free. And at the time I was like, that's a lot of money. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. That's a
And
mountain of money.
yeah. And I'm like, it's Call of Duty. Let's go.
Right.
And obviously, you know, looking back, I'm like, man, I was a shithead. So dumb.
Right.
You know,
So
unfortunately,
did you go?
I didn't go. So I, you know, I was talking to my folks about it because I didn't want, you know, my relationship to influence my decision on that. As much as I loved my wife and everything, we were just dating at the time. So I kind of wanted to follow my own path and, you know, the goals I had
Right.
set. And just talking to all the people, you know, around me that loved me, I was just, you know, I came to the conclusion that I already had the GI Bill. You know, I did get injured a couple times while I was serving, so I am technically a service-related disabled vet. So, you know, I figured, okay, it's always there. That opportunity is always there. I had my military clearance, my security clearance for a couple more years. So I figured,
Right.
I said, you know what, let me give school a fair shot. I was never really good at school. You know, I dropped out of high school, everything.
Right.
So I already had that, you know, that bitter relationship with the educational system. But I earned it in the military. So I said, the least service I could do for myself is to actually put myself through the school and try to work it out. So I went through community college and for 2 years. And I after 2 years, I started taking a liking to it. Turned a leaf there. I started doing, you know, jobs that appealed to me. At the time, I was a gym rat. So I started personal training. Um, and then I did that. And then, you know, I moved to Silicon Valley. At the time I was living in Sacramento. I moved to Silicon Valley with my wife. At the time, she was going to nursing school there. So I was getting ready to transfer to a 4-year school. So I did so at San Jose State University. While I was there, that's really where I took off, like, you know, on my entrepreneurial pursuits. I was working at a gym, Gold's Gym specifically in Campbell, and it was insane, man. Like the people, the traffic that would go in there, you know, the folks that would go in there was nuts. Because you're thinking like it's a meathead gym, you know, you're not gonna really have exposure to a lot of people that you want to have exposure to. But that was contrary to the truth. You know, like the WhatsApp CEO would come in and he would pull up in his G-Wagon. Next day he'd pull up in a Ferrari, and I'm like, what the heck? Like, and I would see
Yeah.
all these people from the tech world, and then I just, you know, I saw dollar signs and I was like, I just got immersed. I said, I need to learn, you know, as much as I
Right.
can here. So I started digging around and joining different groups and stuff. And then I started getting intrigued with the whole mobile app development. So I started putting together a plan to start developing mobile apps for gyms, fitness facilities, because I always saw like a gap there. Members will always complain. I was the front desk and personal trainer, and members would always complain like, "Hey, the app's not working, it's clunky, whatever, has bugs, has issues." And so I figured like, okay, I have a problem here. People want it. Let me see if I can find a
Right.
solution for it. I'm in the melting pot of engineering, you know, like, come on.
Right.
So I got one of my buddies who's Pakistani, and he told me, "Hey, I got tons of relatives, friends back home that could help us build this thing." And so I did a couple Zoom calls with these guys. I would get off my shift from the gym around like 12:45 a.m., go home, clean up, and then get on the computer, do a Zoom call. And I had class the next morning because I was still going to university. And I would get on a call with these guys for 1 to 2 hours every night, and we figured it out. And we built a first MVP. And so we started pitching it to all the different gyms. I got like 19 gyms that said no. They said kick rocks. And then finally I landed one. And we did that for like 3 years. I was working with this gym in particular. And essentially what I did was point of sale. I was taking percentages there, ad revenue, all kinds of things. While I was doing that, I was hearing a lot of buzz about cryptocurrency, Bitcoin
Okay.
this and Ethereum that. And in fact, I ran into an issue with the app at one point. where there was a specific bug that was like, it was, the whole user experience was getting decimated. Like it was giving me like panic attacks. I was like, oh, this is like going to be the end of my business. And I would try
Right.
to get a hold of my folks in Pakistan. I couldn't get a hold of them all of a sudden.
Right.
And weeks and weeks went on. I'm like, you can't have bug issues, the same issue for weeks and weeks. Like, folks are going to delete the app and that's it. You're done.
Yep.
And so I finally get a hold of them and they told me, sorry, man, like we've been actually pivoting a whole business model. We're going to get away from developing apps. We're going to move into cryptocurrencies. And by this point, I've been hearing that, left and right. And again, going back to Aaron, my cousin in Dominican Republic who's running the farm, he comes to visit me for like 6 weeks. He was living in the East Coast at the time. He comes and visits me in the Valley. And while he's there, he has 2 laptops. And so I see him every morning messing around with 2 laptops. And I'm like, what are you doing? And he's like,
Right.
I'm in the dark web. And I'm like, the what?
Oh,
So
no.
he starts explaining what the dark web is and all this jazz. And, all the crazy things that you find there. And I remember seeing Bitcoin, the little logo, and the ticker, like the price action, and it just fluctuates. It goes like this every single day.
Right.
And I remember just asking him, like, "Hey, man, what's up with that? Like, how does that work? What is it,
Right.
why is that going down? Are you losing money? Like, what is it? Did you buy something?" And so he explains the whole, on a very high level manner. He explains the whole mechanism of how Bitcoin works. And at the time, it was hovering around, I want to say like $900,
Okay.
$800 to $900. And then I said, "Oh, can you help me buy some? Like, I just want to buy like anything, even if it's like $100 or whatever." I was a student at the time, So I buy a couple $100 worth, and then it goes up within a week. And I'm like, that's weird. I was like, let's put some more money in there. Eventually, like within a couple weeks, I put like a couple grand, and I saw it go up like 3x. And I was like, this is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
like this is going to zero. This has to be a scam. So I pull out that money, and then I just watch it, and it continues to go up for the
Right.
weeks and weeks and weeks. And this was summer of 2017, May of 2017 that I started. And so by the end of that year, it climbed upwards of 20 grand. It was hovering
Right.
just under 20 grand. And by that point, I was hooked. So I came to that point with my mobile app where I was more intrigued with this. So I just pivoted towards that. And I've been doing that since. I still do that, to this day. And yeah, so that's kind of like with the journey prior to cigars. That's what I've been doing. And
So now we come to that pivotal point, right? So you found something that you're passionate about. You're clearly successful. You're probably thinking back to those early days as a front desk and trainer where you're seeing G-Wagons and Ferraris rolling up and everything, just going, damn, I want a piece of that. And now you're a successful trader in crypto, and you're being successful, everything else, but then you approach another crossroads, right? And something starts calling on the inside about family legacy, Dominican Republic, tobacco, your grandfather, and what do you do?
Yeah, man. So I would say for 4 years, I was just, I was eating it, so to speak. Like I was just going through it with crypto. I was not making gains. I was not winning. I picked up another gig at Costco. So I was always like, I needed to work and I always wanted to be busy and be productive. So I went and got a part-time job at Costco. I was making like 21 grand a year, and I put every single cent into crypto for 3 years. Every single cent, like a madman. And all my friends and family, my wife thought, they thought I was nuts. And I believe them to a degree. I was like, you have to be a little nuts to kind of have that kind of conviction with anything. And I was just, I saw the trends, and I've seen that it had gone to a couple cycles prior, the peaks and the valleys. And I said, okay, I'm going to take my chances here. In the event that there is another peak, I want to be in. I want to participate in that and make some gains there. And so my mind was all consumed with like, I want to, I came from nothing. I want to make something.
Yes.
And
yes.
so I didn't have any kids at the time. So my ambitions were very dumb, very, early 20s. I'm thinking like, I just want to make money, get a Ferrari, all that dumb stuff.
Right.
And so, fast forward, I meet Brandon, my co-founder of Don Doroteo Cigars, and a couple other buddies. I meet him through an investment. We get on some channels and we're talking, and we have like, we don't even have our names. We have like some synonyms and some avatars, and I get to talk to Brandon, and then finally we get comfortable enough where he gives me his real name. We get to talk like this. We see each other's face, and then we build a relationship that way, which is kind of a funny way of doing it, right? Like I like to consider myself like old school in the way, like I met my wife at a salsa club, all those kind of things.
Right.
But at the same time, we're living in this world where you kind of have to have a hybrid mentality there, where you could get a podcast or interview done this way, where you can get work done this way, where you can meet friends this way. And so it just kind of happened that way. And so these buddies, Brandon included, we all get together and we keep investing together. Fast forward to 2021, it was June of last year. We finally came to a point where like, dude, we did something with this, which is crazy after so many years of, feeling like, crazy people and having, everyone around us telling us we're crazy. And then finally we're like, it's real,
Right.
And so we go to Puerto Rico, San Juan, Puerto Rico. And I remember like we're hanging out in front of the beach, and Brandon was a big time aficionado, and I had no idea because most of our relationship we never met in person.
Right.
So a lot of the nuances and little things you pick up in person, we hadn't got the opportunity yet. So we get there, and he has a little Pelican case, and he has a bunch of goodies in there, and he whips out a bunch of cigars, and he's telling me like, this cigar in particular is such and such, it's from this year, it's a collector's, blah blah blah. I want you to have it. And he started giving everyone cigars. Out of everybody there, I was the only one that knew how to cut a cigar, how to light it up and everything. And so I think he was like, oh, you like cigars? I'm like, yeah, I smoke cigars from time to time. I wasn't, big time aficionado, so to speak. And I had that heritage and legacy in the back of my mind, but I never, taken it to the next step. On the same deck where I'm sitting now during the pandemic in 2020, I was whipping up a plan. Because in one of my instances, I got inspired, and I'm like, man, I remember during that pandemic when things were, just hard and tough, whatever, I would just come to this deck and I would smoke cigars, or have some glass of wine, whiskey, whatever the case is. In one particular instance, I was listening to some music that I remember my uncles listened to when they used to drink, my dad, my grandfathers, and I was smoking a cigar. And I remember I was thinking about Doroteo, my grandfather. I looked up to him a lot. And, I just started thinking, I was like, man, like, now that I have this crypto thing going, I'm like, is this what I want to leave for my kids? Do I want my son and my daughters to bear the stress of dealing with a crazy market with, filled, like, there's a lot of good things about it, but there's a lot of greed. There's a lot of, materialism, just surface level things. And I just don't want to pass that to my kids. I don't want my kids to think that that's what life's all about. And I have this, I was pondering about my childhood, because when you have kids, it kind of makes you like think of all these things, like your childhood, what can you do better than what you saw growing up, all these kinds of things.
Right.
And so I remember thinking that like a lot, just like, man, I don't want this to be the legacy that I leave my kids. I came to that realization, because it's one of those things, it's cliche, but you don't know until you see it for yourself that, money is amazing is an amazing resource to help with a lot of different issues, but it's not going to bring you happiness. And it's pretty shallow in itself, just in its, alone, without any context of how do you put it, without any foundation.
There's no substance, right? It's a shallow scoreboard.
Exactly. And so I started whipping up this plan. I said, if I were to do anything in the Dominican Republic, I would love to either get in one of two businesses. So my grandfather Doroteo used to do two things. He used to, primarily, he used to grow tobacco. He would grow, harvest, age, and he would sell Andullo cigars. I'm sorry, Andullo tobacco. These little hockey pucks looking cuts, and he will sell them in his farmer's market. So he had a farmer's market, and he will sell it there along with produce, milk, all kinds of stuff that he would harvest. And then the second thing he would do is he would grow tobacco, and then he will sell that exclusively to La Aurora. And I didn't know any of the details because my folks never told me, hey, he's been doing that since he was 16 in 1936. No one
Right.
thought to say.
He's
It
been
was
selling
like,
to La Aurora since 1936.
yeah.
Okay.
So they just kind of glazed over that, and I'm just like, it's kind of crazy. But at the time, I'm just whipping up this plan. And I'm thinking like, okay, cool. If I wanted to do the whole farmers market thing, I was like, this isn't really, I have a family. My wife's American. I have 3 kids here. I was like, I don't really see myself going over there and having a farmers market, but I could see myself diving into the tobacco side. So I started thinking about that. And I'm like, if I wanted to do anything, what would it be? And so I was thinking, like, okay, do I want to just go in here and make money? And so I went back to crypto, and then I said no, because at that point it's like, okay, obviously you have a business, you have to be profitable, right, to sustain. But at the same time, if I want to just strictly make money and be surface level and have no substance, right, I'm gonna stick to
Right.
what I know. I'm gonna stick to crypto.
Right.
Like, why try to reinvent the wheel when something's working already and I paid my dues in that industry? Might as well stick it out. But instead, I said, you know what, some of my most fondest memories, and obviously, stuck at home in 2020, and I just want to travel really bad. And like, if there's anywhere I could go, where would I go? Dominican Republic. I'm biased.
Right.
So I whip up this plan, and I came to kind of a breaking point. I'm like, okay, I kind of know now what I need to do to get started. And essentially, what I did for this business plan was the same thing I used to do in tech with the mobile apps and all that. So I kind of used the same blueprint. Okay, like, what are my constraints? What are my known constraints? What are my unknowns? And so how do I fill in these gaps? Who can I reach out to? What resources do I have that I can use to learn about these gaps? And so fast forward, I'm in that beach again in San Juan, Puerto Rico with Brandon. He's giving me cigars, we're smoking them, and he asked me, he's like, you ever thought about being in the tobacco industry, or like starting your own thing there? And I'm like, actually, yes. So I show him my phone, and on my drive I had the business plan. I show it to him, and he's going through it, and I can see his eyes lighting up, and he's like, you never told me you liked cigars as much, or like that you were into this, or that you had any passion, regarding this industry. I'm like, never came up, man. Like, all we do is like all this degenerate gambling in crypto. Like,
Right.
Two completely different worlds. So we started talking there. We were there for a couple of days, and every day we touched base on it. And then when I got back, I remember him telling me specifically, he said, I'm serious about the proposal I made you. Like, I'm serious about wanting to do that. And if you're ready to go, I'm ready to go your speed. Whatever speed you go, that's the speed I'm gonna go. And at that moment, I knew, I was like thinking to myself, like, he has no idea who he's talking to right now.
Right.
Because at that point, when I see an opportunity like that, like, how can I pass that up? Like, it's one of my best buds. I trust him more than,
Yeah.
I don't want to
He's
say
family.
He's family, essentially. He's family, man. Like, I've done transactions with this guy that I wouldn't do with a lot of my relatives. It's just the reality, because in this crypto thing, there needs to be a really high level of security and trust between your constituents, that you're working with. So I already had that, and so I figured, what, let me start putting some things together and see what we can do. So going back to the constraints, right, the unknowns, and where I can go to fill in this gap. So when I got back, I started making calls to the Dominican Republic, got with all my aunts and uncles, and I started asking them questions like, who did Grandpa work for? I knew it was La Aurora, but I didn't know to what degree. So, like, was he a small-time producer, a big-time producer, whatever the case was? Come to find out, he was one of the biggest producers of tobacco for La Aurora. His cousin, Guillermo was his name. He was the what do you call him? I guess the liaison for La Aurora, who would go to all the farms. Yeah, the broker. He would go to all the farms, and he would collect the harvest and do the whole transaction, facilitate the transaction for the farmers. And so I came to find out my grandfather only worked with La Aurora exclusively. So I said, okay, let me call them up. So I just went on Google, found their number, and I'm thinking, like, I'm expecting the same thing from, like, building the apps. Like, I'm gonna do 20 phone calls, and 19 of them are gonna be, hey, go up yourself.
So you call up the main number, the receptionist of La Aurora answers the phone, and you proceed to tell the receptionist this really compelling story to try to get to somebody in control.
Right. And I remember doing that, and she goes, who are you? And I'm like, who can I talk to if I wanna do business with La Aurora? And she connected me with the right person. We did a couple of emails back and forth. Eventually I get their phone number. I called them up, and they were very welcoming and open to the idea. I told them the whole story, just like I did here. And they said, all right, we need to do some vetting. So they got back to me a couple of days later, and they said, all right, everything checks out. Let's talk. What do you want to do? And I told them, like, I want to have a farm just like my grandfather. I'm from New York City. I don't know jack about farming, and I'm not gonna. I told Brandon, when we go in here, and then in this industry, we want to be authentic and just be real. Like, I don't need to be a
No
seasoned
BS.
farmer.
Yeah.
I don't need to be a seasoned farmer to have a passion for something, for cigars. So I said, I want to grow tobacco. I want to harvest it. I want to process it and everything, and I want to sell it to you exclusively. And what do we need to make that happen? And so they opened up all the resources to us. They gave us agronomists. They gave us greenhouses. They gave us folks that could come out and inspect all the soil that we for the lands that we were prospecting. I had my fingers crossed for one plot of land. It was my father's land, where his family's, where he grew up as a kid. This is where I used to go during those summers when I lived in New York City, and we would go and play hide and seek and just mess around and stuff. It was all barren. It had like mangoes and plantains, like wild things just growing, coconuts, but never any tobacco there. So I told Aurora, like, we're interested in purchasing this land here. Could you go and inspect the soil and all that? So they took samples. And lo and behold, they came back and they're like, this land is very fertile. It's really good because it's been barren for so many years in such a fertile, environment in the Jacket Valley of the Dominican Republic. They're like, this is good. Like, we could do some work here. But they said the only factor here is you got to find some water. So we had to find a natural source of water. So this is where the games begin, so to speak. Like, where all we start hitting the walls.
Like so you realize, like, you've been doing this now for actually not all that long, but
a year, just 1 year.
But that said, like, when you say all this out loud, you realize how crazy this is, right?
Yeah.
That this is the American dream, right? That, people with just this passion and this clear vision. It's why I love this story so much, right? That you were humble yet passionate enough that you call up La Aurora and you tell them, look, I've got this family legacy, but I'm a kid from New York City. I don't know anything, but I want to buy a farm and I want to grow quality enough tobacco that you buy it exclusively. Now, normally, certainly in America, what would happen when you had that conversation? Like, they would be rolling on the floor laughing, going like, kid, like, what are you talking about? Like,
stay in your lane.
Yeah, exactly. You just said you know nothing about this, and you just want to buy a farm, use our resources. Like, why? If we're using all of our resources, why don't we just go buy the land and do it ourselves? Like, we don't need you for anything. And yet they opened their doors and shared their resources, and here we are.
What was it like Patrick was saying? What was it that had them make the decision in favor of you rather than saying, like, we can just do this on our own, we have the money, we have the resources?
I honestly, like, I wish I had a clear answer. And to this day, I always talk to the Manoli Noah, the master blender, and I always tell him, like, bro, why are you so nice? Like, why are you so helpful? Like, I just like, I love it. I love it because I love the idea of abundance and just kind of like paying it forward and always, and from my position, always seeking mentors. And I just love that idea, man. Like, and they really stand by it, man. Like. And it's not just because I'm working with them. Like, these guys, I don't care what happens. I will not leave this partnership. I will not go work with anybody else, because the way that they were so receptive to my my requests, and they could see, I guess, how passionate I was. I think that's maybe what it was. They could see that I was really passionate about it. I never, not once said like, oh, let's make money. We're going to make X, Y, Z. Like, I never talked about that, because it wasn't about that for me. It was about, I have a 1-year-old twins right now, a boy and girl, and I have a 4-year-old daughter, and I just want to see my daughter running through those fields. I want my kids to be proud of something when I'm gone, other than like, oh yeah, he was a degenerate gambler for XYZ amount of time and he made some money and now we're
Right.
well off. That's,
Right.
that's not
Right.
the story I want to be known for. So, I'm trying to apply the same methodologies that I did learn. There were a lot of great things that I learned through tech, through crypto, like going really fast, being aggressive with your goals in a sense, like be humble enough to know you don't know jack, you don't know
Right.
anything, but be eager and very, very disciplined when it comes to like learning and just finding the answers to the problems and the questions that you have, and going at a crazy speed, and being very, very organized in that trajectory. And so that's what we did. Like first thing I did when I got back from Puerto Rico before I called Aurora, I called up my cousin. During the pandemic, 2020, my cousin Aaron, he got fed up with the whole mandates and stuff, and he said like, why am I here when I could be in Dominican Republic? He grew up there for 10 years. He was born in New York City, but he spent the first 10 years of his life in Dominican Republic. He knows the freedoms very well and the lifestyle. He's like, man, I could live on an island, go to the beaches, do my thing, and just have fun, have a good time, and wait this out and see what happens. So I get back from Puerto Rico. I call him up and I said, hey, man, you have any intentions of coming back anytime soon? And he goes, no, I'm thinking about staying here. And I said, okay, well, at one point, Aaron told me when we were going to the Air Force, he said, when we get out, I want us to have a business together one day in Dominican Republic. We always dreamed of that. And we didn't know at the time, we were kids. So we're thinking like, we're going to have a hookah bar, or we're going to have
Yeah.
we're trying to bring
I'm glad you shot higher than a hookah bar.
we're trying to bring the things that we learned in the U.S., like the U.S. identity, I guess. We're like running away from our origin, from our heritage. We're just trying to kind of bring the cool, like the U.S.-based stuff into the Dominican Republic. And it was so funny. It was like backwards. Like instead of running from that, go towards your path, where you come from, your origins. And that's what we did. So I hit him up and I told him like, hey, man, you want to do this? And he said, heck yeah, I want to do this. Let's go.
Yeah.
So, he's very, he looked up to Doroteo as well. And, we share that in common as well. And so we both went guns blazing on that. He was representing me in Dominican Republic. I was here with Brandon. Brandon's out of Nebraska. And so we would get on calls just like this, the three of us, and we would go one factor after the other. So the first thing was like, okay, we need a farm. So La Aurora came in the picture, got with Manolo Noah, the master blender, got with the agricultural lead at La Aurora, Atanasio. And those two gentlemen helped me out tremendously on both fronts, cigars and the farm. They helped us locate all the resources and stuff. And then we just kept going. Every factor, like little things that you don't think about because you don't know, right? So we came to a point where like, okay, who's going to design our bands? Let's start looking online like for some cool designers. And then we find this gentleman with a Pinterest account, and his name turned out to be Jeff Moss, who I had no idea who it was because I'm new to the industry. And I get on a Zoom call with this guy, and I see all these like awards and stuff behind him, and I'm like, who is this guy? So I started doing. I should have probably done that before, but I started looking him up, and I'm like, oh, this is an OG in the industry. Like this guy, worked with Alec Bradley for over a decade, and he helped them, market and brand a lot of the cigars that are popular today. I just saw Cigar Aficionado was put up a post about the black market. Which is so cool because I know Jeff Moss branded that, and it made me proud. Like just every time I see that kind of stuff, that's one of the guys I lean on a lot because aside from being a creative genius, he's like a Kanye. That's what I call him. He has so much industry knowledge, so much, and so
and
I
knows so many people.
Right, very well connected as well. Obviously, he spent so much time in the industry, so. Then he came into the picture. So it was the four of us. It was Brandon, Aaron, Jeff Moss, and myself. We kept trucking, and little by little, we just started tackling all the things. And eventually, we came to a point where we had a farm. We had a curing barn that was built. That was the exact replica of the one at Davidoff. One of the ones at Davidoff. And the reason is because I really look up to that company, specifically Klaas Kellner, which I got to meet at PCA, which for me, honestly, out of the whole experience, that was probably one of my highlights in particular because he was a big inspiration for me. And I remember seeing their curing barn, and I'm like, I just want to emulate. Like that's the one I want to have. I want to be like these guys, and not even in the sense of like like, oh, monetary gains and stuff. It's more about like, I love seeing the family legacy being passed on generation to generation, and that's what I aspire to. I want to do
And
that.
also, I mean, the other thing you can't discount about Davidoff is the power of a brand, right? That became more than a cigar line; it's a lifestyle brand, right?
Yep.
When you see Davidoff, it
Yep.
represents something more than just, oh yeah, that one blend of cigar I really like, right?
Right. It superseded the cigar, and that doesn't happen by accident. Obviously, like there's branding geniuses behind that, but at the same time, there's an authenticity to it
Well,
that
you
you
have to
can't
be able to
replicate.
back it up, right?
Yeah.
You can't market your way through a mediocre product.
Exactly.
At some point, you've got to back up the hallmarks of the brand, and consistently, year over year, product after product, you can't disappoint.
Right, and even if you have a good run and you're able to, again, lean on the branding geniuses and whatnot, eventually, the people are going to see you for what it really is. The truth always comes out. So, but long story short, I got to meet him at PCA. When we were getting ready to launch, we were like, okay, where are we going to launch? So I started looking at all the biggest events, and I'm like, what's the biggest event? PCA. That's where we're going to launch.
So
that was good.
No, go ahead, Alec.
PCA 2021.
22.
Oh, okay.
Where we met you. Yeah.
Okay. Yep.
So, yeah, but keep in mind, like we're looking at basically, a 12-ish month window, from you sitting on a beach in Puerto Rico with your buddy to
crazy.
to now you own a farm, you're making cigars, you have a brand, and you're launching it at the biggest cigar event in the world.
Yep. And we had a harvest.
And you had a harvest.
We had a harvest.
All
our
in
first
a 12
harvest.
month, in a 12-month period of time.
Insane. Like, and that was one of the proudest moments for me was, and I was nervous when I was flying to DR. Like, I've been seeing all the drone footage. Aaron is really into the tech as well. He would send me drone footage on WhatsApp. We would communicate just like this regularly, like every other day or so. Keep me informed what's going on with the workers, what's going on with the crop, all that jazz. And I was pretty nervous because even though it looked great on footage, I'm just thinking like, oh man, like, everything's come to this moment. Obviously, like launching your cigar brand at PCA, it's very, very monumental and it's cool and it's important. But for me, like the farm aspect, for some reason, and I don't want to make it sound bad, but it almost held more weight for me because it was the land that my father grew up on. It was, there was so many emotional elements to it for me that when I got there and I saw this crop and it was like as tall as me and I'm 6'1", when I saw that, I was like, dude, like this is insane. We did this. Like, and I just remember seeing Brandon's face and he was just like, and I just leaned in and I held him and I just told him, like, hey, you remember when you told me you're ready to go my speed? I was waiting up to tell him that.
Right.
And then he just started laughing. He's like, dude, you're a maniac.
But here's the craziest thing is, I experienced the cigar for the first time at PCA Your Cigar, and it's good. Like I mean, and I shouldn't sound that, say that in a surprising manner because now I know you and I know, I don't think you would have released it if it wasn't good, right? It's one thing to grow a crop, right? I mean, we experiment with a vegetable garden in the backyard, and sometimes when we're really diligent and everything else, you pick the vegetables, and it's like, oh wow, these are really good. These are better than what you buy in the store. But you know what? Some years you pick it, and maybe the weather was off, maybe the fertilizer was off, maybe something was off. And it's just like, ooh, wow, that was a wasted season. That was really bad. But
that's what I was expecting. I was expecting that.
Right. I mean, it's your first.
Say it again.
Talk about that timeline because you guys have cigars out now. What makes up that cigar, especially with the age of the company? So how did you guys come to having a blend and having your own crops?
Yeah, so it was a two-part process. Obviously, the business itself is, a lot of folks, they take the route of, just buying cigars from a company. They slap on a cool label, pump a bunch of money into marketing. That's what it is. I wanted to take a different approach because, again, I'm not doing this for money. If I wanted to do that, I could just stay in crypto. So what I said was like, okay, even if the farm is not profitable, I don't care. I want to have a farm because that's what my grandfather did, and we're going to continue doing that, and we're going to use that as like an incubator, so to speak. So by that, what I mean is we're going to use it like a lab, a live lab, where we can experiment and try to grow different strains of tobacco, different variations of things that perhaps never been done in Dominican Republic, or haven't been as successful in Dominican Republic because of all the natural elements. So going into that first season, I thought it was going to be, you were gonna be completely underwater from the
Right.
farm standpoint, because I did not expect to have that much tobacco, good tobacco, to growing and be able to harvest it. Because one thing is growing the tobacco, the other thing is, okay, cool, it looks pretty and everything. Once you start harvesting that and you're bringing it into the curing barn, that is a whole dance. That is like, man, that's when you really gain that respect for the industry. The people that are growing their tobacco, harvesting it, aging it, all vertical, and they are releasing these cigars, man, that is such a cool thing to go from A to Z in that respect. I knew that we couldn't do that in the first year. Like, with an ambition of launching within the first year, there's no way that I was going to, put my grandfather's name on a cigar that was, made it composed of tobacco that was harvested, within, under a year.
3 months earlier. Yeah.
Exactly. So essentially the agreement that I did with Aurora was, we will harvest tobacco, work with you exclusively. We'll only sell to you. You tell us what you need, and we will grow that. They will then use that for their blends. So they take it to, because they have the vertical integration. They're the oldest company in the Dominican Republic, so they have everything they need to make sure that tobacco is then properly aged and feasible for other brands, right? So that's essentially what they're doing with that tobacco. We planted seeds, or rather, we transplanted seeds from the greenhouse in late November, and we had the harvest in the same week as Pro Cigar in Dominican Republic in February. So that was, I want to say, February 24th or so.
That sounds
right. And so, like, throughout that short window of time, we learned it was like a crash course, because every day it felt like there was a fire you had to put out, right? And so Aaron would call me, and they're like, dude, it's been raining for like 3 days or 4 days straight, and it's just pouring. Like in the Caribbean, it just pours. And so, I'm like, okay, what does this mean for the tobacco? I would get with the agronomists, I would get with all the folks, and they're like, you need to do X, Y, Z. You need to make sure you're putting fertilizer. You need to make sure you're doing, this and that to ensure that the crop doesn't get oversaturated, and then it dilutes the quality of the crop. And so, in the beginning, we would have the agronomist come out a couple times a week from La Aurora, and he would say, man, this is looking like rapper, man. Like, this is amazing that you're even able to do this in the first season. And then as the weeks start going on, we're getting inundated by all the elements, right? Whether it's like just a dry period, whether it's just flash floods. And we're on a slope too. The property's on a slope. So luckily my dad has been helping me. So he retired last year around February, and he was getting bored. So he lived in New York City and was kind of entrepreneurial himself, always worked multiple jobs. And so I could just hear in his voice, it's not what he thought it was going to be. Retirement was not what he thought it was going to be. So I asked him, like, hey man, would you mind like helping us out? Like, the property is a 3-minute walk from his house. So at first he's like, I don't know how much I can do, but I'll try to, help you out here and there. And then throughout the weeks, he just took ownership of the role. And I love that. Like, he came alive again. Like, it was my dad in New York City that used to hustle and all this stuff. And so him alongside my cousin Aaron, they will tackle all the different factors. And then I would do the communicating. I would make sure I'm facilitating a lot of that stuff with La Aurora. And then we took care of all those, random factors that came into play from the natural elements.
Well, and it says a lot about La Aurora as well, right? Because as much as Brandon had to agree to move as fast as you, to some degree, La Aurora did too. They probably didn't even know exactly what they were getting into.
They didn't, but they were ready. That's one thing I'll say about them. And one thing I came to really appreciate, because again, this is new to me, so I didn't really understand, like, okay, how many companies like La Aurora of that stature, like work with, how many clients do they typically take on? How many people, how many partnerships do they make? How many folks do they help create brands, sub brands, you know?
Mhm.
And I believe they're one of the ones that have the lowest count as far as like how many partnerships they have. So they actually have a lot more time to allocate to each relationship,
Yeah.
to nurture those relationships and help us along the way, help us grow. To the extent where not only were they helping me on the agricultural front, but also with the cigar, right? So we're
Yeah.
putting together the blends. So the way
I
that
was
works.
going to ask. So
Mhm.
tell us about your launch blend. What makes it? How did you come to pick it, and what makes it so special?
So what we did there was again leaning on, you know, folks that have a way more experience than me. I got together with Jeff Moss, a creative director, who had a seasoned palate. I'm 32 years old. He's been smoking as long as I've been alive. So, you know, for me, I'm like, okay, cool. Well, you know, that's definitely something I have to. I can't ignore. Aside from, you know, creating all the marketing and branding and stuff. I got with Brandon, got with Manoli Noah, the master blender, and a few folks that he master blender opened up to us. So when we flew out there, he would have us, you know, try different things, meet different folks, and we got to meet different folks in the industry that, you know, mutual relationships. And one thing that I loved, it was like the minute we joined and we were a partnership, it's like, all right, you're family now. So we're going to help each other out. Everything you need is that, you know, whatever you need, you let us know. And so I told him straight up, same thing I'm telling you guys, like, I'm from New York City, man. I've smoked cigars, like a handful. Like, I don't really know what I'm doing here, but I'm really passionate about, you know, honoring my grandfather's name. And I don't want to have him roll in his grave over a cigar that's not worth a damn. So when we started putting the blends together, Brandon was really adamant about the Sumatra grown in Ecuador. That's one of his guilty pleasures, so to speak. Like, he always talked about that. And so obviously being my partner, even though I was running a lot of the stuff in the farm and whatnot, like, you know, we're like a brotherhood. So for me, that was like, okay, a guaranteed thing. Like, okay, let's make sure we implement that some way we can make it work. And so we had Manoli Noah give us blends that had a combination of the Ecuadorian Sumatra. Brandon also wanted Nicaraguan in there. And so we tried different things. There were a couple of them that we tried that they just, even for someone that's not seasoned like myself, smoking cigars, you could just tell, like, okay, this is not something if I'm not going to enjoy it, man, I'm not going to try to sell this to anybody. You know, this doesn't make sense to me to do that. So as we were going through the different variations and stuff, we started just doing the process elimination. And then eventually we came to a point where we were close to the cigar we have now. And then at that point we had like 5 different variations of that, pretty much just the compositions. And as far as like what, particularly with the filler, because the filler is the most intricate part there, where we have Nicaraguan, Colombian, and Dominican tobacco. The wrapper and the binder are Sumatra grown in Ecuador. So when we came to that piece, that's where Jeff Moss came in, and he this is where his OG status shined. We were smoking together, and he strictly just took a cigar, and he was like, you know, in order to really understand like what the makeup of the cigar, you can't just look at the cigar, you know, and just be like, okay, cool, let's just smoke it. And he started walking me through the process of analyzing the ash as it's burning, analyzing, just doing different things, like, you know, teaching me about, you know, like the smells you pick up, like all the different things that you pick up even before you light the cigar, just going from A through Z, to the point where he was like, you know what you should do? You should open up one of the cigars, and you should take the different variations of the tobacco and just chew on it and try different things and just really get a sense of what it is that you're really going to put out there to the world. And so I remember I was sitting right here in this deck, and I would go to local cigar shops. When I was here at home, my wife would just walk out. She's like, "What the heck are you doing, bro?" And I'm over here looking like a surgeon. I'm just like,
dissecting cigars.
Yeah, and just taking notes on things. And at the time, I'm like, "Look, dude, like I am green as it comes." And you know, for a long time, I was just chain smoking. I was like, I feel like I'm just a chimney. I was frustrated because I wanted to curve the learning curve. I wanted to cut that, but obviously, there's something you have to go through it. You have to go through it. So what I did was like, okay, I can't rush time, but what I can do is I could try to smoke more frequently, more cigars, and just try to really pick up on different things based on what you see, the critics say. But at the same time, like it's very, I don't know exactly how to put it, but it definitely it it influences the way you perceive the notes. So if, for instance, if somebody says like, "Oh, this is nutty," and you could really taste leather and yada yada, when you smoke it, you're like, "Yeah, I could really taste that." So
Right.
I did a lot of things like dissecting. Actually, was for me was the best way for to really pick up on little things. But really, that's not consuming it from a smoking standpoint. It's just picking up on the notes, like the flavor
Right.
profile. Um, and so when we came down to the last 5 cigars, different variations, Manny said, "Hey, I want to show you something." So he pulls out a cigar, and he's like, "I want you to add that into the mix and just smoke them." He didn't give me a band. He didn't tell me anything about it other than Sumatra, Ecuador, Nicaraguan, Colombian, Dominican. That's all.
Hmm.
And when we were smoking together, Brandon, Jeff, and myself, I remember Jeff smoked this cigar, and he was just looked at me. He's like, "If you want your 90 plus rated cigar, that's the one." And so
Right.
I was like, okay, that's the one. And
Right.
so, and that's what it was. And, perhaps that's not something that from a marketing standpoint or branding standpoint, a lot of owners will own up to, but that's how we came to that conclusion. And for me, it was a matter of, I want to honor my grandfather. I want to make sure that if I'm going to put something out there to the world, it's going to be something that he would be proud of. And we
Right.
actually enjoy the smoke. And so, we're kind of like in an echo chamber. Like we're telling each other, like, this is it. This is this is the next best, like this is good, a really good cigar. The real truth comes out when you put it out there to the ether, right? So when we go
Right.
to PCA, I was thinking like, all right, we're new kids on the block. I'm not lying about my journey here, or about my palate or whatnot. Like it is what it is, and this is what we are. And then I was expecting people to be kind of like, whatever. We see brands come and go all the time.
Hmm.
That didn't really bother me because I've always been really persistent in any endeavor I had in the past. And I've seen the success of just sticking it through, being in the tunnel, so to speak, feeling failure after failure after failure, and then eventually getting on the other side of that. So I knew like, okay, I'm in this tunnel now. I left a
Right.
successful one and I just entered a new one, and now I'm starting all over again. And that's fine. And so we went to PCA. It was a huge surprise to have folks come up to us and like, this is great. I love it. I was just like, oh man, that's like affirmation. And yeah, it made everything so worth it. Like, firstly, seeing the crop in person in Dominican Republic in February. And then secondly was PCA.
You're not
Yeah.
only a new brand. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Alec.
I was going to say you're not only a new brand, because you're right. There's a lot of new brands that pop up and then just disappear, or they don't get the respect of the industry, or the product just isn't good because they come in and then they pay someone to make a cigar and they have no investment in it, whether it's the legacy and story behind it or the product itself. It's very detached. But you guys got the involvement and trust from a brand like La Galora or La Aurora, and then you have the legacy of your family. So
Mm-hmm.
you came in with roots on day one.
And I leaned on that a lot. Like aside
Yeah.
from having the confidence from my co-founder Brandon, who's a serial entrepreneur, this guy, he's done everything in between tech and agriculture. He has farms in Nebraska. He's obviously in tech with crypto with me, and so leaning on him, leaning on Jeff, but also leaning on my family. One of the beautiful things that happened in this journey, going back to the trip in Dominican Republic, I put together a little cookout. We roasted a pig, a very Dominican style, and we had a family gathering, kind of like the one I was explaining from my childhood.
Right.
We had it in where Doroteo had his farmers market. His house was right next to that. Right now, that's my aunt's house. He passed it on to her. My cousin Aaron lived across the street, so his house is across the street from there. So we went there to film that, to capture all that, and then afterwards we were gonna do a cookout and kind of just talk about Doroteo. I gave a speech and just to honor him and thank everybody for supporting me in this endeavor and trusting me with his name.
Right.
And I was taken back, man. Like there were, like people were just really like leaning in, and like there's some footage that I put out there from that event. It's on YouTube all over our page and stuff, and you could see a lot of my relatives, a lot of my aunts and uncles and cousins just rejoicing, just super happy. And it really got to me, man. It wasn't, and like, I didn't think that was going to happen, but it actually got to me. And I was like, oh, like I was started my speech, and my voice started to crack a little bit. I was like, oh no.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, it's just, it really hit me, like how profound that is to be able, because you could say all day like, oh, we have a legacy of yada yada and 86 years, and all that is cool, man. But it's like when you see your family back you up and be supportive of that and really be happy and proud of what you're doing to honor him and the rest of them, right? Like that for me was everything. I felt like at that moment I was like, I accomplished what I wanted. This is what I want my kids to have,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, it's I I am a lover of authenticity, right? Because I feel like society just keeps moving more and more towards materialistic, shallow things,
Yeah.
and keeping score on the wrong scoreboard. I grew up poor as well, and all around me, you see signs of what's defined as success, right? The guy
Mm-hmm.
drive up in the G-Wagon or the Ferrari or wearing the
Right.
Rolex or whatever
Right.
it happens to be, and you're like, wow, I see the respect that guy gets, and I see the lack of respect I get because I'm riding a bicycle and wearing clothes from Sears Roebuck,
Right.
and wow, I aspire to have that someday, and so I think when you're young, your American dream is just the scoreboard of money, right? I want to be a millionaire. I want to be a billionaire. I want to have all these things because
Mm-hmm.
then I'll get all that respect and then I'll
Right.
be happy, right?
Right.
You mentioned something earlier that I agree with wholeheartedly. Having kids changes all that. And from the second my daughter was born, our first child, the whole scoreboard changed. And then it just became about, man, how do I become the best role model? And now my scoreboard's completely different, and it's based on authenticity. And like you, it's I wanna immerse everything that we do, right? Not say, but everything we do, the people that we surround ourselves with, the people that we work with, how we work, the people that we employ, how we treat those people. I want that to be a reflection of the values that I want to hopefully someday be part of my legacy so that when my kids grow up, maybe they're bored going to work functions. Maybe they're bored, going out camping or doing things out in nature or whatever, and they just want to be at home on their iPads. But just like you and just like me, sooner or later, you look back to those roots, to that foundation, to something that's authentic. And I think that, the one thing that stood out with you time and time again, right? I'm sure it's why La Aurora opened up their doors to you, right? I'm sure you weren't the first call to them over the decades.
No.
But they opened their door to you. The whole community within the Dominican Republic opened their door to you. And at PCA, just a little more than a year after you entered the industry, they also opened their door to you. We opened our door to you, right? So you're already you feel like part of the family to us, and because it's authentic, right? You weren't just pursuing money and prestige, because like you said, you could have taken pennies on the dollar to your investment, bought some tobacco, hired a blender to wrap your band on whatever cigar he said was great, and been in the cigar business.
Right.
But that's not walking the walk, right?
No. And I knew that's a cash grab. That's what we call that in the investment world. And there, I see a lot of that, and that's applauded in the investment world. You go in, you invest early, you get out, screw the founder, screw the owner, screw the partnership that you had, your word, it doesn't matter. You move on to the next. And it's kind of like the culture of not only the investment world, but also like the Valley, Silicon Valley. It's cutthroat. And it encourages people to be more competitive and really stay on the ball and really deliver so that you don't lose that investor. But then it's just, for me, like, also coming from the Air Force, like I hated seeing, and from a tight-knit family, and then the Air Force as well. And the Air Force, those are my brothers, man. Like the folks that I deployed with, those are my best friends to this day.
Well, they're authentic, right? Because
Yeah.
you see it, not because they say, "Oh, we're brothers," but you
Yeah.
see your brothers stand in harm's way to protect you and to
Yep.
protect other brothers, right? Like
Yep.
that's the ultimate in sacrifice and authenticity. And the same goes with the way that you've started this out, right? It was your American dream, right?
Yep.
That if when it's done the right way, you can have your cake and eat it too, right? Hopefully you
Right.
make a little profit,
Mm-hmm.
more than enough to provide for your family and your needs, but it's something more than that.
Right. And yeah, man, and it's really surprising to me, like exactly what you're describing there. Like I found that brotherhood here in this industry too, and I didn't expect that because I thought like, okay, I come from the investment world. I see how cutthroat it is there. I'm thinking here like it's an open market. We're all competitors, so to speak. So you know, um, they're not going to be, they're not likely to help you out and try to boost you up when you're their direct competitor to an
Right.
extent.
Right.
But it was the contrary to the T, man, to the T. Like obviously getting started, you have a farm, cool. You have your own cigar, great. Now import it to the U.S. Oh, you don't have a license? You're done. That's
Right.
that's a roadblock. One of the factors that we ran into, and who helped me? It was a quote unquote competitor.
Yeah.
We met in person, we smoked, and then the dude was like, "Bro, I got you, man. I'll help you out. I'll get started, and then when you're ready to get your own spot, your own warehouse, and all that jazz in the U.S., then I'll help you merge into that." And it's
Right.
like everywhere I go, man, it's like it's been the same experience. Even at PCA,
Yeah.
same thing.
One of the
So
few industries that you see that across the board, and then the people who don't play along with that and aren't in it for the community and the all boats rise approach, they stick out immediately.
mhm.
And at PCA, like that was the first time we were there. You're seeing, I think, more than, because I've been to a lot of trade shows in other industries, and I've never seen an industry where you have owners of competing brands in each other's booths just hanging out.
Yep.
Right.
That's all it was. Half the
Mhm.
booths we went to, it's the guy we're there to talk to, and then
But the funny thing is, I mean, there's always the 800-pound gorillas in every industry, and cigar industry is no different.
Mhm.
There's some big corporate, conglomerates with CFOs and spreadsheets and
Yep.
everything else. But I think it's that startup to middle of the road that's the majority of the industry, that I see those same values in the other industries that this magazine serves. You see that in the multi-generational trade within the firearms industry as well. You see that in a lot of small shops and everything. And as hard as any business is, to start and to build into something, with competition and everything else, today, within these industries, alcohol, tobacco, firearms, it's such a higher bar to even get out of the gate. There's so much regulation, there's so much legislation.
Mhm.
It feels like half the government is actually fighting against you,
Right.
in addition to all the normal barriers of business. And so it's why we love serving these industries, is because you find people like yourself that are just passionate Americans with family values, that are just pursuing their dream. And what I love most is these are diehard people. I mean, they just don't tap out, and I love that about you.
Thanks,
what's
man.
next?
Yeah,
What's next for your brand?
what's next? So, couple things. So, from the tobacco standpoint. So, in the Dominican Republic, we had this first harvest. It was successful in the sense that we didn't succeed in harvesting any wrapper, but we had a heck ton, hundreds of pounds of binder, more so than even filler. And we saw that initially we had the makings. If it would have been someone with a lot more experience, they could have put more than likely harvested some wrapper. And so I saw that as an opportunity. Like, okay, the goal here is to get better year after year. It's not to come out the gate guns blazing, hit a grand slam, and then cash grab and be out. It's
Right.
it's year over year, just a long term horizon. And so at PCA, I got one of the OGs there from Nicaragua, who I can't say who it is because he's currently contracted with another company. But going back to what we're talking about, the brotherhood, this is a man who is, I have no business talking to this person. I approached him, and very soft-spoken, very humble dude, and I knew through Jeff Moss, who is like whispering in my ear the whole time. He's like, this is so-and-so, that's so-and-so. He's like, that guy helped a lot of the big corporate names, like you were describing, Patrick. He said that's one of the guys that helped them build from the ground up
Right.
back in the day, way back in the day. And so right now he's kind of under the radar, like he doesn't promote himself, doesn't put himself out there, not egotistic at all. And I just approached him and I say, hey, sir, do you have a moment? He's like, yeah, sure. What's up? And then I just told him, like, and I went with Jeff. Jeff introduced me, and I got to talking to him, and I told him what I'm doing. And I thought he was going to be like, like, who do you think you are? Like, coming out of the gate,
Right.
you have a farm. Instead, he said he was I could see him getting excited. And so it was really cool for me because, he's in his later years, he's in his late 70s, and he probably feels like he's on his way out, so to speak, with the industry in a way. But I could see him light up because he got excited, like, yes, the next generation, like, let's go. And
Right.
he actually wanted to help me, and I told him, like, I would love to be able to produce wrapper, and I'm really interested in doing two things, following what Brendan was saying about the Sumatra grown in Ecuador, and then also Nicaraguan wrapper. And so with this gentleman in particular, I proposed, like, hey, would it be okay? And obviously I do everything very businesslike, in the sense, like, you help me out, I'm going to reciprocate, whether that's payment, whether that's whatever the case is. It has to be done right. I'm not here to walk over anybody, so to speak. So I told him that I proposed that to him, and he's like, no, don't worry about that. He said, I'm going to source you Nicaraguan seed. I'm going to help you get started, set up, and all the ends that come to, as it pertains to growing wrapper. It's a very intricate process, nothing like what we did the first time around. The first time it was like Wild West shit, like we just figuring it out as we go. He said, like, it's going to be really, there's so many factors that come into play here, and I'm gonna help you out with everything. So he essentially told me word for word in Spanish, he said, I'm gonna give you my blueprint for
Wow.
and I was just like, why?
Yeah.
But he was just, hey man, it's cool, like, same thing you told me. He just said, like, I could tell you're real, and I love seeing that, your passion, and you're trying to, honor your grandfather's name, and you're helping a lot of families in the Dominican Republic. So I want to help you out and continue to do so. And so that's what's next for the farm. We're in the process of getting all those things in place now. What's next for the brand, and what, blends are we working? We're working on 2 blends right now with the master blender. Some folks are telling me, like, hey, you should try to push it out. There's always people giving you advice from all over.
Yep.
And they're telling me, like, you should push it out at TPE. You should get the next one out and just, banger after banger, just keep going. And I said, no, we're going to take our time with it. I want to really give this cigar its fair shot. I think it's worth it. And for this year, we're just going to focus on El Legado, our first blend. And so the other 2 blends are not going to be released until PCA. So that's what we're going to do.
I love it.
Yeah, one of them is a very limited quantity. And it involves what my grandfather was very passionate about, Andullo. One of my first experiences with tobacco, as I said, was with Andullo, with his stuff in particular. So I kind of want to walk in his footsteps, so to speak, and I want to pursue that. So we're working on 2 blends, PCA. Yeah. So
That's awesome, man. That is so exciting. So where can people find your cigars?
So during PCA, one of the funny things that happened, like all the attention that we were receiving there, that was not what I expected. Like, from folks like you, your company, and others, and then from the retail side, I came back home and I had a deck of cards that were like, a full deck of cards there, and I started going through the list with Brandon. And then initially I'm like, well, we could, this person's requesting this many, this person's requesting that many, XYZ. And so Brandon, this is where leaning on the shoulders of giants, so to speak, comes in handy. Having way more experience than I do when it comes to business, entrepreneur pursuits and all. He said, be very careful about the relationships that you create, the partnerships you create. So he decided, we're going to work together, go through the list together with the help of Jeff Moss, and we're going to I don't want us to be kind of arrogant, but we're going to cherry pick in a sense who we want to work with.
Sure.
So we're putting that list together right now, and so we're going to release that in a couple of weeks. And it's going to be very select few individuals that we're going to work with to start off, just because there's no need to we're not mass producing cigars. We started off with 33,000 cigars for our first blend. I don't have no intentions of being in every single lounge and every shop and just hiking up our bottom line. So that's the path we're going to take. It's unorthodox, just like everything else we've done, but we're sticking to our guns on that.
I love it. I love it. Make sure you reach out to us. Let us know when that list is available, because I know that the second anybody tries one, they're going to be hooked, and you're going to have a loyal customer for life.
Yeah, man. That was the experience, and that's what a lot of people told us at PCA. And the whole time I was just like, what is going on? People are asking for autographs and taking pictures. I'm like, this is not what I expected.
Yeah.
So it was really cool, man.
Well, I am excited, and optimistic isn't even the word. I'm confident, and look forward to many more chapters, many more discussions, many more discussions about yet another successful release from you, because I know sky's the limit for you. So
thanks, man.
Thank you so much for coming on, for spending so much time sharing the details of your story, which I find incredibly inspiring. As I told you when we met, we like telling stories about the American dream, and you are living it in spades. So well done for you and your family and your partners, and certainly for all of us as the benefactors of your hard work.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, man. I really love doing this.
Thank you.
Out of all my interviews at PCA, yours was my up there was my favorite. And I think it was more so, and I told you this on a private conversation, it's more so than just, like, all right, great, here we have another cigar brand, yada, yada. It's like, man, it tapped into other elements of me that I didn't think I would find there. And so I was hanging out with the vets, and we were just sharing stories, and we were talking about how we're going to help them out with cigars, also with crypto, to help the vets that are deployed, and then getting to meet you guys, and then seeing what you guys are about. And I'm like, this is cool, man. You guys have like the whole, hitting all the angles there.
Well, we're excited to have met you, and like I said, I mean, thanks for spending so much time. But I think this is just the first chapter of many for both of us. So here's to you. Thanks again, and no doubt we'll be talking again soon.
Awesome, brother. Thank you.